Chapter 7, As If Together, Part 1. The latest issue of HeYiShengXiaoMo magazine had been released. The young man on the cover, with a satisfied smile, was a rising star in the field of architecture. Over the past 2 years, he had won numerous international design awards and gained widespread recognition. "It's a shame he's not handsome enough," Xiaohong commented with infinite regret. "That lawyer, he is handsome, but unfortunately, he's hard to interview," Ame chimed in loudly. "Ame, don't say that," Xiaohong couldn't stand her sharpness and retorted, "Mosheng has done her best." Mosheng happened to approach them and overheard their conversation. She glanced at Tao Yijing, who was quietly writing something at her desk, and felt a hint of guilt and unease. Sheng. Suddenly, Xiaohong remembered something and flattered her by shaking her arm. "We're friends, right? You wouldn't refuse to do me a small favor, would you?" Mosheng immediately had a bad feeling about it and cautiously asked, "Xiaohong, is there something wrong with the surgeon you're seeing? Otherwise, why would she need to go on a blind date again?" "Nonsense. What are you thinking?" Xiaohong pouted, covering her face with both hands, pretending to look sweet. "It's about this." She took out an exaggeratedly large piece of paper from somewhere and shook it in front of Mosheng. "Take a good look." Mosheng saw it clearly and felt dizzy. The paper had "shopping list" written at the top center, and below it was a long list of various brands of clothes, shoes, cosmetics, and even a digital camera. It was a diverse assortment, and Mosheng's head was spinning. "Xiaohong, are prices going up recently?" This was practically a shopping frenzy list. "Hehe, aren't you and Chinjia planning to go to Hong Kong?" "Don't change the topic. One word, will you help or not?" The news had spread quickly. Mosheng sighed, "What's in it for me?" After work, Dr. Ching invited Xiaohong to dinner, and Xiaohong kept reminding Mosheng at the dining table, "Shing, you know what they say about short-lived relationships." Mosheng chuckled, "Don't worry, I'll help you until my hands get tired." "But, Xiaohong." She leaned in and whispered, "Aren't you giving up on acting like a lady?" Oops. She forgot again. Xiaohong immediately straightened up, revealing a perfect smile that wiped away her previous stern expression. Mosheng saw the elegant Dr. Cheng's eyes sparkle with amusement. He had clearly noticed and enjoyed the transformation. Mosheng smiled too. Xiaohong had finally bid farewell to her past. After dinner, Mosheng went home alone. She realized she had taken the wrong bus and ended up heading towards her previous place of residence. Hurriedly, she got off at the next stop. Looking at her watch, it was not yet 7 p.m., so there was no rush to go back. She wandered around the supermarket for a long time and didn't return home until after 9 p.m. When she opened the door, the house was empty. In the kitchen, she unpacked her groceries one by one: monosodium glutamate, cooking oil, salt, soy sauce. The kitchen was bare. What did Yichen usually eat? In the bedroom, some clothes were still not organized. Opening the wardrobe, Yichen's suits and shirts were neatly hung, looking plain and cold. He seemed to prefer gray tones. Mosheng hung her clothes next to his and smiled foolishly, then suddenly felt heartache. Yichen. She took off her shoes and lay on the bed. She had been sleeping in the guest room these past few days, but now, she suddenly didn't want to leave. An inexplicable emotion overwhelmed her chest, perhaps because of what would happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, Friday, Yichen would be back. She fell asleep without changing her clothes. In her half-awake state, she seemed to hear someone moving around, but she turned over and fell back asleep. Later, she woke up to find that it was already morning. She opened the quilt and got up, the quilt. Mosheng was puzzled. She must have pulled it over herself because she felt cold last night. Hastily brushing her teeth and washing her face, she saw her hair was a bit long in the mirror, constantly falling into her eyes. She needed to find time to have it trimmed. Gathering her things, she opened the door and was stunned. Yichen, dressed in a suit, stood outside the door with keys in hand, as if he was about to open it. Mosheng widened her eyes and looked at the person in front of her. Yichen. Why was he here? Wasn't he supposed to come back at night? Yeah, Yichen put away the keys, responding casually. He walked past her and went into the guest room. A while later, he came out with some documents. When he saw her still standing by the door, he furrowed his brows. Aren't you going to work? I'm going. Mosheng felt a bit awkward. For the first time, she realized that their relationship had changed, and from now on, every morning, the first person she would see would be him. I'll give you a ride. Mosheng followed him into the elevator. No need, I can go by myself. The law firm and the magazine were in opposite directions. Yichen pressed the button for the underground parking lot and said indifferently, I'm going to the Axe District Court, it's on the way. Oh, okay. Mosheng now understood. In the car, Mosheng suddenly remembered to ask him, Did you come back last night? Otherwise, how would there be documents left in the guest room? Yes, Yichen answered briefly, his attention focused on the road. Mosheng pursed her lips. Why didn't you call me? Around 11 o'clock. He answered a bit impatiently, then paused before adding, there was no need to. Mosheng's eyes dimmed slightly, and she turned to look out the car window. It was rush hour, and the traffic was terrible. Would they continue to be stuck like this every day? Yichen, if you're in the Axe District at noon, can we have lunch together? Yichen suddenly moved, turned his head, and spoke softly, as if speaking to someone. I probably won't be there at noon. In fact, he wasn't there in the morning either. Yichen. Lao Yuan's big eyes blinked at the person who walked into the law firm, and he rubbed his eyes like a little girl, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Could my eyes be playing tricks on me? I think the one with the problem is not your eyes. Yichen glanced at him and walked into the office. The big man followed closely behind him and sat down. You contacted me yesterday afternoon when you were still in Guangzhou. How did you come back so quickly? I was at the airport at that time. Yichen sat down and flipped through the documents. Is everything settled? Pretty much. When Yichen said pretty much, it meant that there was no problem at all. Lao Yuan had to admire his junior brother. Dealing with matters in Guangzhou within a week was already considered tight, yet Yichen managed to finish a day ahead. He wondered how Yichen did it. You came back late last night, didn't you? Why the rush? It wouldn't have been too late to come back today. Lao Yuan mumbled, if I didn't know that you're also a loner like me, I'd suspect you hurried back to be with your wife. The pen that had been writing on the documents suddenly stopped and left a heavy mark on the paper. Yichen lifted his head from the documents, paying no courtesy to him, and issued a peremptory order. Lao Yuan, if I recall correctly, you have a court hearing this morning. Seeing the person in the meeting room, a maid quickly handed him the printed materials. Attorney He, I've already printed the information you requested. And here is the invitation to see University Centennial Celebration, sent together with the one to Attorney Yuan, she said, handing it over separately. Thank you. Yichen nodded and accepted the invitation. It was exquisitely designed with the iconic building of C University on it, indicating the centennial celebration on November 15th. Ame looked at the wall clock. It was already 5:40 p.m. Attorney He, if there's nothing else, I'm going to leave. There's nothing else, you can go. Then I'll leave first. Ame packed up her things and suddenly remembered something. Attorney He, your phone rang several times just now. Yichen had forgotten to take it with him when he went to the meeting, and there were 2 missed calls. One was from the other party he had been dealing with, so he immediately returned the call and spoke for a few minutes before hanging up. The other call, he pressed the green button. The other party answered right away. Yichen. What's the matter? His voice sounded a little distant. The other party seemed to be deterred by his coldness and paused before saying, Yichen, I can't find my keys. Across the street, she waited for him, her bag slung over her shoulder, wearing a sweater with a large collar, looking down and counting the tiles on the ground. A red light. He stopped, watching her from afar. So many things hadn't changed. She still liked wearing sweaters. Despite being in her late 20s, she still dressed like a student. When she waited for someone, she would count the tiles on the ground. At that time, he always made her wait. One time, after waiting for a long time, she got angry and complained to him, I've counted to 999. If you make me count to 1000 next time, I won't talk to you anymore. As a result, on another occasion, he was caught up in a last-minute meeting by the department, and after the lengthy meeting, he rushed over. To his surprise, she was still there. This time, she didn't show any anger for waiting. She just looked at him with a touch of grievance and said, Yichen, I've counted several 999s. How many times had he counted to 999 over the past 7 years? He had thought of giving up, but he could never make it to 1000. Chapter 7, As If Together, Part 2. Hastily walking along the sidewalk, Yichen slowed down as he approached Mosheng, who was accompanied by a plump foreigner, smiling and talking to him. Yichen gradually approached and faintly overheard the foreigner saying, Your spoken English is perfect. Thanks, I've been there for 7 years, Mosheng replied, smoothly speaking English without any hesitation, as if it were her native language. Yichen's hand, which was in his pocket, unconsciously tightened. Just then she asked, Now, only the 2 of them remained. Mosheng suddenly felt awkward and didn't know what to say. Yichen broke the silence, Where are your keys? I think I lost them, she said uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Or maybe I just forgot to bring them with me this morning. Yichen keenly observed her uneasy expression and felt a strange emotion welling up inside him. If she thought she could hide her guilt from him, she was mistaken. If Miss Xiao committed a crime in the future, it would be best for her to remain silent, otherwise, she would expose herself with just a few words. Let's go, he suddenly quickened his pace and walked ahead, suppressing the emotions that arose due to her small actions and the ripple that formed in his heart when she mentioned, my husband. Where are we going? Mosheng asked as she followed behind him. This direction was not toward his home, it was in the opposite direction. To have lunch. Lunch? Mosheng hurriedly followed him, trying to keep up with his fast pace. Can't we go back home and eat? Let's go to the supermarket first, it's not too late. When did she learn how to cook? And for whom? Yichen's tone was slightly chilly as he replied, No need. If he said there was no need, then there was no need. But, could he slow down a little? Yichen, please slow down, Mosheng said breathlessly, reaching out and grabbing his sleeve, unaware of how intimate her action was. Yichen's heart jumped suddenly, and when he lowered his head, he saw her fair fingers holding onto the sleeve of his dark gray suit. Without saying anything, he slowed down his pace. They turned a few corners and entered a small alley, arriving at an ordinary small restaurant. Mosheng curiously looked around, but there didn't seem to be anything particularly special about the place. However, it was often the most inconspicuous places that served the most delicious food, and if Yichen brought her here, it must be good. The boss greeted them warmly as they entered the restaurant, speaking the local Yi city dialect. "It's been a while since you last came, Mr. He," the boss said. Mosheng was surprised to hear him speak the local dialect, but Yichen replied in the same dialect, "I've been quite busy lately." The boss looked curiously at Mosheng and asked, "Mr. He, is this your girlfriend? It's the first time I've seen you bring a girlfriend here, and she's very beautiful." Yichen smiled, "No, this is my wife." "Wife? Mr. He, you got married?" The boss exclaimed in surprise and turned to Mosheng, saying, "Mrs. He, you're so lucky to marry someone like Mr. He. Are you also from Y City?" "I'm also from Y City," Mosheng replied, understanding the dialect but speaking Mandarin at home due to her mother being from another region. The boss chatted with them casually while handing them the menu. Yichen gestured for Mosheng to order, and she took the menu and saw that the restaurant's signature dishes were all related to bamboo shoot slices with chicken, fresh bamboo shoots with shredded pork, and fresh bamboo shoots stir-fried with pickled vegetables. It wasn't surprising since Y City was known for its abundant bamboo shoots, which were currently in season. She loved bamboo shoots, but maybe she shouldn't order them. After a while, they placed their order, and the boss reproached Mosheng, "Mrs. He, you're from Y City too, why don't you eat bamboo shoots?" Was it strange not to eat bamboo shoots? Yichen didn't eat them either. In the past, when they ate together, he always said that bamboo shoots had a strange taste and never touched them. "Mr. He always orders them," Mosheng explained. The dishes were served one by one, but Yichen's chopsticks never touched the bamboo shoots. Mosheng hesitated. "Why aren't you eating them?" The boss said. Yichen interrupted her, "It's fine." His tone was somewhat restrained, and there was a hint of self-mockery. "I'm not used to making people wait." Every time he returned home, it was always a lonely room. It was already past 11 o'clock. Yichen opened the door, and his fingers instinctively reached for the light switch on the wall but stopped just before pressing it. The light was already on. He put down his hand and surveyed the room. The TV was on, but there was no sign of anyone. He walked over to turn off the TV, and as he passed the sofa, he caught sight of someone curled up and sleeping. He suddenly stopped. Yichen stared at the sleeping face and felt the urge to wake her up and scold her. It was so cold outside, how could she sleep on the sofa? Was she brainless? Although annoyed, he still bent down and gently picked her up from the sofa. Her soft body filled his empty embrace, and her warm breath gently brushed against his cold suit. In all these years, he had never dared to imagine a day like this, where she would be within arm's reach. With just a stretch of his hand, emotion completely belonged to him. Bowing his head slightly, he brushed his cheek against her soft one. After sleeping outside for so long, she was still warm. Mosheng in his arms moved slightly, avoiding his touch, and Yichen held his breath, fearing that she might wake up. But she only found a more comfortable position, buried her head deeper in his embrace, and fell back to sleep without realizing that someone's heart was surging due to her small movement. Yichen sighed, unable to control his increasingly tender emotions. He lifted her gently and put her on the bed. She wore a cardigan over her sleepwear. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to help her take it off. He unbuttoned it one by one, and his breathing began to get erratic. The feeling of the soft skin on her back, even through her sleepwear, made his heart race uncontrollably. He pulled the blanket over her and quickly stood up to leave. If he continued to stay there, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't wake her up in a certain way. After washing up in the outside bathroom, Yichen walked towards the guest room. When passing by the master bedroom, his steps paused for a moment as he suddenly remembered something. He pushed the door open and looked at the bed. Of course. The quilt only covered half of her body, while the other half was dragging on the floor, and one foot was boldly exposed outside. In just a short 10 minutes or so, she could sleep like this. It seemed that when she used to say her sleeping posture was only a bit bad, it was too modest. Knowing that her sleeping posture was bad was during the winter they spent together. Mosheng caught several colds during those 2 months, 5 times in total. At first, she refused to say the reason, but later, she embarrassedly opened her mouth. My sleeping posture is a bit bad at night, just a bit bad. I keep kicking the quilt. When my father comes home, he can help cover me with the quilt. But here, there's no one, and I always have to struggle to get the quilt at midnight. So, you can't blame me for catching colds. As she spoke, she already had the appearance of a cold-afflicted person, with an expression of, I have a reasonable explanation, and it has nothing to do with me. Now it seemed that her sleeping posture was more than just a bit bad. Yichen lifted the half-dragged quilt from under the bed and covered her again. But as soon as he let go, she unexpectedly turned over, and the quilt fell to the other side of the bed. What a sleeping habit. Yichen reached over, pulled the quilt again, and covered her firmly. He stared at the peacefully sleeping Mosheng with a somewhat annoyed look. If she dared to kick again, he wouldn't mind correcting her sleeping posture all night long. Unfortunately, Mosheng remained obediently asleep, not moving at all. In the end, she even curled up in the quilt as if she were afraid of the cold. At such times, even Mosheng, who was sleeping, knew to be considerate. What time was it? Was it daytime or nighttime? Why was she sleeping on the bed? She sat up from under the covers, her mind not quite clear. Mosheng got out of bed with sleepy eyes, but she couldn't find her slippers anywhere. Where did they go? Yichen came out of the kitchen and saw Mosheng hopping around in her pajamas in the living room. He couldn't help frowning. What are you doing? My slippers. She spotted them over by the sofa and hopped over to retrieve them. After putting on her slippers and looking up, she saw Yichen staring disapprovingly at her. I was looking for my slippers. She suddenly felt guilty for no reason. Go change your clothes, he said coldly and turned away. When she lowered her head, she blushed at the realization. She almost forgot there was another person in this room. After changing her clothes, Mosheng came out, and Yichen was already having breakfast. She hesitated for a moment and sat down next to him, looking at the plain congee and dishes on the table, eating breakfast with him. Seeing her hesitating, Yichen raised his gaze, not used to Chinese-style breakfast. No. She snapped out of her daze and quickly lowered her head to take a sip. Surprisingly, it tasted pretty good. Yichen. Seemingly knowing what she wanted to ask, Yichen didn't look up, casually asking, "How's your English?" English? Why did he suddenly ask about this? It's okay, but I haven't passed the level 4 yet. Before going to the United States, she took the level 4 English test for the first time and proudly achieved a glorious score of 59. Embarrassing to mention. Come with me, Yichen said. Ha! Mosheng looked at him in surprise. Go where? To the law firm, help me translate some documents. She couldn't translate. Staring at the English words on the paper, it was outrageous. After so many years abroad, she still couldn't do it. Ask Yichen. Glancing up, he seemed very busy. Maybe she shouldn't disturb him. In the quiet office, the phone suddenly rang. Yichen flipped through the documents with his right hand while answering with his left. Hello. I'm at the law firm. Sorry, I have something today. On the other end, someone said something, and Yichen smiled. Lao Zhou, when did you become a matchmaker? Lao Zhou said something again, and Yichen smiled. Are you asking me to have an extramarital affair? What extramarital affair? Lao Zhou reacted slowly and then refuted himself. Are you saying you're married? He exclaimed, thinking it was a joke. Don't mess around, anyone can get married, but you, Yichen, can't. What nonsense, Yichen laughed. After hanging up the phone, Yichen looked at Mosheng, who was working hard next to him. A bad habit that couldn't be changed. Back then, she couldn't do calculus, and she would bite on her pen and then push her homework to him, looking at him pleasingly. Yichen. Feeling sorry for her as she was the one studying law, and yet she did calculus better than many science students. Yichen. Mosheng really couldn't translate it anymore and raised her head to seek help. Walking over to her, he instinctively took what was in her hand. Where? Here, how do you translate this? Mobilia personam sequuntur. It means movable property follows the person. A very professional term in Latin, and she couldn't handle it normally. His breath was very close, enveloping her nose. Mosheng suddenly remembered when they used to study together. Yichen always seriously said, Mosheng, don't sit next to me. Why? She came here to study with him. It disturbs me. Feeling a bit upset, she vowed, I promise not to talk to you, not to go out to buy snacks, not to move around. But before she finished, Yichen had a frustrated look on his face. Even if you stay quiet, you still disturb me. What the heck? At that time, she was so angry that she took her books and ran away. But now, she seemed to understand a little. Because he didn't do anything, just standing behind her, bending over, the refreshing male scent surrounding her. Her hair gently brushed against his coat. If she raised her head a bit, she might bump into his chin. Her face inexplicably became slightly hot. He was disturbing her. Then, before she even realized what she was doing, she suddenly stood up, jumping away, and accidentally bumped into someone's chin. What are you doing? Yichen touched his sore chin, surprised by her actions. I want to go eat, she said guiltily. What kind of excuse was that? Now she thought of it. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was not even 10:30. Now. Yichen frowned, as expected. Yeah, I didn't eat much in the morning, she said resolutely. Glancing at the mountain of work piled up on the desk and then at Mosheng, who looked a bit strange because of being hungry, Yichen surrendered. He knew that bringing her to the law firm was definitely a mistake.